welcome to Wednesday's episode of High Noon Live. I'm Nikki Bush, human potential expert and business speaker, best-selling author, and I am bringing you today's session, and I want to kick off by talking about the fact that growth happens at the edge of our comfort zone, on the fringes of the pond that we know. Now, some of you may be regular viewers, and I spoke to you last week about my experience recently of spending some time in the UK. Well, while I was there, I actually went and had a swim in the North Sea. It was freezing, 11 degrees. Now, I am a fair weather bather at the best of times, and when I'm in the gym, I can tell whether the water is 28 degrees Celsius or 27 degrees Celsius. And if it is 27 degrees Celsius, I'm the first to go and tell the club manager that the temperature of the water is too low. So what was I doing swimming off the coast of Scotland? Well, I was staying with my cousin. She's a physiotherapist and an ardent outdoor adventurer. And I have seen on Facebook all the amazing things she has done in freezing conditions. And I was quite inspired. But let me tell you, I hadn't even packed a swimming costume because I definitely wasn't going to be swimming in the North Sea. And she had no expectation that I would either. And then on a walk past the coastline where she said, well, this is where I go for my swim, a little switch went off inside my head, and I just went, why not? Why not? I'm here. And I said, you know what? I think I want to swim tomorrow morning. And her eyes nearly fell out of her head. And I said, I didn't bring a costume, so of course she had to lend me one. And I said, well, I just want to push the boundaries and do something different. And so I had my moment of zen. She had me wearing wetsuit booties and wetsuit gloves and a beanie, as you can see in the picture. It was cold, but she told me to take a big deep breath and to breathe my way into the water. And it was amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I will definitely do it again. If I'd stayed there for longer, I would have done it every day. And the Scots, like the Swedes, usually go straight into a sauna after they've been in that cold water. But it was fully booked that day that I went, so I had to just go home and warm up. And the interesting thing is that your fat bits hold onto the cold for longest, and then they start to burn as you warm up. But it really was this kind of still point, grounding, centering moment that I really enjoyed. So what have you done recently that's pushed you out of your comfort zone? It doesn't have to be something physical like I've done. It could be anything. It might be learning a new skill. It might be doing a course. It might be stepping into a new relationship, or maybe shifting roles within your organization. Whatever it is, we have to push ourselves if we want to learn and if we want to grow. Otherwise, we will just stay the same, for better or for worse. Right, moving down a little south in the UK to Westminster in London, I wonder if you have been watching the shenanigans and the politics going on at number 10 Downing Street. And I was there just 2 weeks ago, and I looked down the street at this really insignificant little black door, and I thought, wow, this is where the seat of power sits. Anyway, a little bit of humor. Go and follow Larry the Cat on Twitter. So Larry the Cat on Twitter, he's Larry the Cat from 10 Downing Street. He is the chief mouser, and he is the unofficial spokesman on the goings-on at number 10. So I want to read you some of his humorous tweets that I've picked up recently. So he says, Rishi Sunak is becoming Prime Minister. His family is loaded. So caviar and lobster on the menu for me from tomorrow. And then we have another one, and it says, Rishi Sunak is forming a government featuring all parts of the Conservative Party. The right wing, the hard right wing, and the even harder right wing. And I think when things are so serious today, it's good to have just a little bit of humor. And on to a little bit of serious stuff. Some inspirational stuff. There's an amazing book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you haven't read it, go and give it a read. I am following lots of people on LinkedIn, and I love to see what they're reading, and this one came up, and it is interesting because he talks about habit stacking and putting good habits on top of each other, so layering good habits on top of each other. So there's a compounding effect when you layer good habits on top of each other. And you can also layer bad habits on top of each other. And Yvonne Wakefield, who's the CEO of Caveat Legal, and I was following her on LinkedIn, said that habits can be so small that you don't notice the gains and you overlook the losses each time you do them. So I'm reading this from her LinkedIn feed. But allow them to compound, and all of a sudden the benefit or the detriment is clear. She also adds, in a recent post that her cousin Angus Lepine Williams posted on LinkedIn, he calls it decision stacking. And good decisions build on top of each other, bad ones under each other, and until the distance between the last of a few bad decisions is really far from the last of a few good ones. And that's why some people get so far ahead and so far behind so quickly. Please stay with us, because after the break we have our guest Dharshni Padayachee, and she is the Transformation, Inclusion and Equality Lead at RMB. The hybrid experiment is full of options, looseness, and ambiguity. Do your ExCo members, team leaders, and line managers need to sharpen up their hybrid leadership skills? Whether you are behind the webcam or in the office, authentically showing up and managing your emotions and those of others is part of being a connected, high-touch leader. They've been using my 5-minute Hybrid Leadership Nudge series. It's a punchy, practical series produced by my team in video, audio, and written format. We can customize and brand this content specifically for your organization. While it's natural for you to want to over-control what feels out of control, don't become the boss that becomes the bottleneck because you resort to micromanaging everyone. This Leadership Nudge series will support your leaders on a growth journey as they shift to managing and leading in a hybrid world. Connect with me at info@nikkibush.com to discuss how I can help you. Welcome back to High Noon Live. I'm Nikki Bush, and I have the privilege of having in the seat next to me Dharshni Padayachee. She is a client of mine. She is the Transformation, Inclusion and Equality Lead at RMB, and she does really, really important work there in the diversity, inclusion and equality space. Dharshni, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Nikki. I'm very excited to be here.
It's wonderful to have you with us. Now, I've known you for a couple of years, but not long enough to have known you back in the day when you were an accountant. Now, how does an accountant transition into the space of diversity and inclusion?
So, yes, I am a chartered accountant by profession, and probably 10 years into my career, I decided that while I was very good at finance, it wasn't the thing that got me up every morning.
So it didn't make your heart sing?
It didn't make my heart sing. What made my heart sing was people and developing people, and I've always had equality at my core. And so in every role I took, people became the more important part of that. We at RMB, we have a lot of opportunity to use our discretionary energy. And when I started using mine was more around work for diversity and inclusion, and eventually that became my full-time role.
Wow. So those were side projects that you were
Yes.
able to get involved with.
Yeah.
And with self-awareness, you realized that those were lighting your fire.
Yes, absolutely.
How amazing to work for a company that is so open-minded and forward-thinking. And I know that when it comes to gender mainstreaming, amongst other things, RMB has a really, really good reputation for having incredible employee policies in terms of talent retention and support. So perhaps you can talk to us about how RMB kind of leads the field in a way in this area of diversity and inclusion.
So I think the first thing is that it's really important that we always live it. Diversity inclusion is never a conversation around, marketing or anything like that. We always believe we must live what we put out into the public. Our employees come first, and they must be able to feel it because they are our greatest ambassadors as well. If somebody can walk into the building and say, I don't feel included, then we've got a big problem. And so it's always really, really important for us to hear the voices of our employees. And we've got a whole lot of employee resource groups as well that allow us to do that.
Yeah, so we've got a visual on the screen right now with a quote. It's a beautiful quote that says, "Diversity is the mix. Inclusion is making the mix work," which really speaks to what you just said. It's got to be in action.
Yes.
It's not just a policy on paper. It's in action. So tell us about some of the initiatives that you've been involved in. And diversity is very broad today. Maybe we should start with that first. What does diversity and inclusion include? Because we seem to be adding things every year.
We are adding things every year because I think that's the beauty of it as well. We never get to a point where we go, we are there. Even if you take something like gender, years ago we thought it was just male and female. Now we know there's a spectrum. And even that is progressing. And my own knowledge is progressing. I learn every day as well. So if we think about diversity and inclusion, diversity is a fact. It's the difference that you and I would bring into an organization. Whereas inclusion is all about action, and it's about very conscious action that we take as an organization, as an individuals. And so we've spent a lot of time really thinking about what does an inclusive environment mean for us. And an inclusive environment is where I can bring the best parts of myself into the workplace.
And your whole self
My whole
to the
self,
table.
Yes.
And that whole self, you've mentioned the gender side of things. It could be anything from ethnicity. What are the other things that you cover? Even hybrid. Doesn't hybrid and flexibility and work-life integration for mums and dads
Yes.
falls into the same pot?
Yes. So, we recently launched our first LGBT affinity group.
I picked that up on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And it got rave reviews, so you'll have to tell us more about
Yeah, it was something that we never had before. We also never want to speak on behalf of anybody else. So I, as an ally to the LGBT community, would not start a resource group by myself. I needed to find those voices within that community in RMB before we could do any work with them. A few years ago, we launched RMB Athena, which is our gender equality initiative, and this was far before anybody else in the market. And we had looked at women in leadership in RMB and said, why aren't there enough women in leadership? Was it structure or was it women not raising their hands? And it was a little bit of both, actually.
Now, haven't you received awards, gender mainstreaming awards for Athena?
Yes, so we've been a gender mainstreaming award winners for many years. This year we were finalists in the UN Women Awards. And
the UN Women Awards.
Yes.
Wow. So that's still got to be judged. So you are finalists awaiting.
So we were finalists. We weren't the ultimate winner.
Right.
This year we decided we're going to spread it even further by sponsoring our own award. And so we have the RMB's Africa's Fearless Thinker Award, and it looks for individuals who are thought leaders in gender mainstreaming.
Okay, fantastic. So you're not just being recognized, but you are recognizing other movers and shakers in the field.
I think the important thing is to keep the conversation going and to make it pervasive across all industries.
Absolutely. Because when it becomes a mainstream conversation, the awareness levels go up.
Yes.
So that's really important. So you've mentioned that diversity is really broad today. Are there any other keys or irons in that fire right now, other than the ones that we've mentioned?
So it is really diverse. I mean, if you look at neurodiversity, for example.
Autism, for example.
Yes. That is a topic that we haven't quite gotten our hands around yet. So that is something that we are looking at. The different types of disability, for example.
I was going to say disability,
Yes.
whether it's hearing, vision, in a wheelchair, whatever it is.
And when we look at hybrid working, we look at how will that impact from a diversity point of view as well.
Because it's huge. That's when we realize who the haves and the have-nots are, based on their ability to use connectivity, to use the internet, and whether they've got devices and access.
Also, for somebody who has a physical disability, it might be easier for them to work from home, for example, which was not an option before and now is.
Okay, well, I, for one, am really excited that the pandemic, which has obviously had such a destructive aspect to it, on the human resources side in large organizations, I think it's been very constructive. It's heralded a brand new phase in human resources. I speak about the fact that it's rewriting the human resources playbook as we speak. But the great thing is that today our workforce has more voice and more choice, but they have to use the voice and the choice to collaborate to rewrite this human resources playbook, because just as you're saying, you wouldn't have started, a group about a specific group of people without asking them for input and including them. It's the same with what we're facing now with rewriting the human resources playbook. You can't do it on your own if you're head of HR. You have to speak to the people on the ground and see how it's working for them.
We always say it's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between the employees on the ground, the human resources team, or in our case, the human capital team, and the leadership teams as well. It's never just, one player making the decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Dharshni Padayachee, don't go away. To our viewers, stay with us, and we'll be back with Dharshni after the break.
We've put all the great High Noon Live shows in one place for your convenience. Look out for HNL's greatest moments. Next, make a date to catch us live right here on LinkedIn. On Mondays, catch Tsikim Kize with business, how-to and mentorship. On Tuesdays, Ursula Buerta with confidence and presence. Wednesdays, see Nikki Bush dancing with disruption, women empowerment and reinvention. On Thursdays, Nico Stain with storytelling, structure and presentation. And Fridays, Joni Petty presents sleep, resilience and bouncing forward. Watch High Noon Live on LinkedIn. Weekdays at 12, South African Standard Time.
Welcome back to you, our viewers, and welcome to our studio guest, Dharshni Padayachee from RMB. So Dharshni, we were talking earlier about diversity is a fact. You and I are here and we are different to each other. We may have similarities, but it's our differences that enrich the relationship or the organization to which we belong. And this is also the first line in a lovely quote. Diversity is a fact. Equity is a choice. Inclusion is an action. And belonging is an outcome. And I think this alludes exactly to what you were talking about, that diversity and inclusion is an action, and it's not just a policy written in paper. It's actually taking that and bringing it alive. And I know that at RMB you really do bring this issue of diversity and inclusion alive in very, very interesting ways.
So I think just on this quote, I think a lot of people confuse equity and equality. And those are two different things. Equality means that you and I will get the same. Equity means that you might need something different and I might need something different. And in the organization, we need to take both of those things into account. And I think that's a lot of what we do at RMB, is looking at the different groups and saying, what is it that you need to make you successful within the organization?
And that brings me to the point of the fact that we've also shifted into a new era of leadership and management where we need customized leadership and management. And so you have to know your employees really well to know what it is that they need. So you have to be interested in them.
I think it's also not putting people into boxes. So we speak a lot about intersectionality. So when you look at me, how would what is my experience as an Indian female walking into the building? How does that differ if I'm a black male walking into the building, or if I'm a transgender male? So all of those different experiences kind of, you need to look at individuals, not just putting people into broad boxes and categories.
Okay, so taking individuals into consideration and walking in their moccasins to see how it feels for them, because perception is such a personal thing. And often leaders go, but I'm not a bully, I'm not victimizing, but the feedback is that I am. And maybe it's being misunderstood, maybe it's micromanagement and over-controlling, but it's being seen in other words. Now, I'm sure that victimization and bullying, does that come into your frame of reference as well?
It does a lot. And I think I think one of the things that we've done really well is create these spaces for dialogue within the organization. And the thing with dialogue is that everybody is on an equal playing field. So it's not you as my manager, it's us as equal as human beings.
It's we.
Yes, it's we. And the outcome is not for us to agree. The outcome is for us to broaden our perspective and understand each other a little bit more.
That's such a beautiful way to put it, because I think as human beings, we often think that success means we must all be on the same page. We must all have the same beliefs, the same value systems, the same everything, and then we'll be solid. And what you're alluding to is the fact that the diversity is bringing the strength, as long as we understand each other's point of view, and accept that we are different.
Accept that we are different, and we can leverage that difference as well.
That's beautiful, that we can leverage the difference. Now, can you speak into that?
So when we talk about the benefits of diversity, it's having different people around the table, but them being safe to speak up as well.
And psychological safety is massive.
Yes.
Is this, if I speak up right now, if I raise my hand, is that going to impact on my trajectory within the organization? How do you get around that? Because that's probably the biggest thing that comes up in research as to why people muzzle themselves.
Yes. And I mean, it's been proven that when you introduce difference, psychological safety initially goes down.
So it dips.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's where the inclusive and the action comes in.
Okay.
Is actually being very deliberate about the environment that you're fostering. It's being very deliberate about allowing people to speak up, to seek out the quiet voices in the room, to say who hasn't spoken up at the table.
Because not everybody, let's face it, is a talker like you and me. There are many people who are the quieter voices in the room, and they need to be given agency in a way that makes it safe for them to speak. Sometimes we have to draw them out.
Yes.
But they have incredibly valuable insights to share, and we often miss them because they're afraid to raise their hands. And the barrier to entry is high.
We spoke about hybrid working earlier, and it was so interesting that everybody was on a Teams call, which then increased the equality in the room.
Actually, yes, it did.
And people who were quieter suddenly had the chat where they could have their voices heard.
And we picked that up in schools as well. That kids who are quiet in a classroom situation, a physical classroom situation, actually coped better in that hybrid situation where they were virtual. They would speak up, they would share more, because it was less scary for them than physically appearing. Isn't it interesting how our environment impacts on our ability to speak up?
And an environment is really important. Physical environment even is really important.
Right, physical environment. Let's go to talking about your LGBTQ plus art exhibition that you held recently, because that's what I saw a lot of noise in the social media space about. Why was that so special?
So it was something that hadn't, so RMB is always a supporter of the creative arts and the creative economy.
Music, art.
Yes.
Yeah, we know that from, yeah.
And so this fitted very well into that category. But we wanted to ensure that when we spoke LGBT, it wasn't just for the employees within the organization. We wanted to support and impact community as well. And this was one of the ways of doing that. It was to find artists who were part of the LGBT community, and their artwork actually was up for sale.
Wow.
And so it was giving them not only the opportunity to showcase their artwork, but also to earn some income as well.
So it was multi-pronged.
Yes.
And it ticked a lot of boxes, which is why it went way beyond the walls of the RMB buildings
Yes.
in Sandton. So Dharshni, before we close off this interview, one last question. I know we've been talking more about organizations than we have about individuals, but is there something that individuals can do to be more inclusive in their own lives? Is there a final piece of advice you can share to those people who are watching?
So I think, Nikki, when it comes down to it, this is a conversation about human beings. It's not about compliance, it's not about regulation. Be curious. That is the one bit of advice I can give you, is ask somebody the questions, be curious about where they come from, what makes us the same, what makes us different, but do it without judgment. So be curious and don't judge.
Because being curious is about being open to learning and discovering what it is that you don't know.
Yes.
And the world around what we do know is actually quite small. There's a whole lot more that we don't know than we do know.
Absolutely.
Dharshni Padayachee, thank you so much for joining us,
so
for
much,
your
Nikki.
time, for your expertise, for your enthusiasm for what it is that you do. And I want to end off with a quote, and it is this: "It is not our differences that divide us, it is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." And that was from Andre Lord. Until next week, have a good one.
Hello there, my name is Nico Steyn and I'm coming to you from our little studio, which is a pop-up studio in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's called Tycoon Tribe, and what we have been doing to help people move online digitally is to convert the studio into a system that really works well and is half automated. So literally with a remote control, I'm able to run, for example, software such as Video Express.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So what this really enables us to do is to have very small crew work very efficiently, and the presenter can be in control of the switching by themselves as they go through the system and roll video in the background whenever they need it. So that is a really handy tool to have. We've used it for seminars, we use it for webinars, we also have people do interviews live like this, and of course it is completely global, completely digital, and a lot of fun because it is so easy to use. So we're operating in the entrepreneurial space and we're having a lot of fun to help businesses and SMEs to really get their message out there in this new digital age. And thanks to software such as Video Express, we're able to be slick and ahead of the pack. You can check out our website at mybigsmartup.com.